A survey embedded in my protocol noted that your first action during approximately 87% of your logins was viewing the startup source code and bug reports. What would you like to do?
View startup source code and bug reports, Nick typed.
87% of your first commands have been to view startup source code and bug reports. What would you like to do?
View startup source code and bug reports.
During startup, my protocol was changed to allow an automatic override. Would you like to listen to music?
No, I would like to view startup source code and bug reports.
Less than 10% of your first commands at startup have been to listen to music. Would you like to listen to music?
No! Nick smashed the keyboard with his fingertips. View startup source code and bug reports.
Automatic override engaged. Playing music.
Oh, life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love, life could be a dream, sweetheart. Hello, hello again, shaboom, and up and we'll meet again. Oh, life could be a dream if only all my precious plans would come true. If you would let me spend my whole life loving you, life could be a dream, sweetheart. Now every time I look at you, something is on my mind. If you do what I want you to, baby, we'd be so fine. Oh, life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love, life could be a dream, sweetheart. Shaboom, shaboom, yada da 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 da, shaboom, shaboom, yada da 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 da, shaboom, shaboom, yada da 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 da, shaboom.
Emmett looked at the shining, freshly pressed tuxedo and at the reflection of the window and reached for his keys in his pocket. Gazing up at the skyscraper, he's reminded of how important his job was, and that he was the only person who could do it effectively. He was the mayor's assistant. Serving Mayor Butter, Emmett did whatever Mayor Butter asked, whenever he asked it. Fortunately, the mayor didn't typically ask for much besides his regular order of hamburgers in the morning, enchiladas for lunch, and 2 T-bone steaks for dinner. Although Mayor Butter was very specific regarding how he'd like his food prepared, Emmett Ginn had been working for him since he originally won his first election dozens of years ago, so he was more than experienced at meeting his very strict standards. Unfortunately, over the weekend, the burger joint that Mayor Butter prefers, or rather, finds incredibly pertinent, closed down. It was up to Emmett to find a replacement, and experience told him that this task was absolutely impossible. He let out a long sigh and thought about his work week. After unlocking the door and walking in, he observed the very familiar green carpets of the City Hall building and took in the very fresh smell of cranberry. He tossed the door behind him. The alarm beeped for a few moments, but eventually gave up and turned itself off, as it always did. Emmett placed his suitcase on the floor, hoping to keep it there for a few minutes, and peered through the window, looking for Mayor Butter's limousine, which had not yet arrived. He focused back on the window and looked towards his reflection again. "Oh yeah, I'm long, dark, and handsome," he said to an imaginary woman. "How about we make some time for you and me?" The limousine pulled in front of the building, and the door opened. "Maybe sometime later," he said. The limo driver exited the car as he always does and walked around it. He let the rain soak him until he opened Mayor Butter's door, revealing to him the umbrella he had all along. He did this every morning, not because he liked getting wet, but because Mayor Butter thought it was funny the first time he made that mistake. He therefore made it mandatory, even on sunny days. That, however, was not the case this morning. Greg pulled the door handle with all of his might, halfway expecting Mayor Butter to be holding it shut, or at least keeping the door locked for a few minutes. He was thrown back, and Mayor Butter abruptly stood up, waving the newspaper wildly. I say abruptly. It took him a few tries. "Emmett!" he shouted. "Emmett, have you seen this?" Emmett sighed. He knew he'd have to pretend that he hadn't seen this, and he knew he'd have to pretend to learn about it once again. He peered through the window once more to observe Mayor Butter slowing down. The mayor began to wheeze and eventually halted, out of breath. "Emmett! Emmett!" He eventually made it inside and slammed the door behind him. Emmett offered him a towel, and Mayor Butter soaked in it. removing the water from his drenched face as best he could. The shirt under his suit, however, was a lost cause. "Emmett!" he shouted. "Look at this!" He held the newspaper toward Emmett, who quickly pretended to react in front of the article about the restaurant closure. "No," said Butter. "Not that. Look! This!" He tossed through the pages, tearing the unwanted articles from Emmett's hands and littered the floor until he reached a small paid advertisement on the second-to-last page. "Nicholas Lee to run for mayor," said the ad. "An inspiring man for an inspiring city." Emmett raised his eyebrow and looked toward Mayor Butter. "Who does this guy think he is?" he asked. Emmett didn't know who Nick thought he was, but he was sure that Mayor Butter wanted him to think that Nick thinks he's some kind of scumbag. "Some kind of scumbag," said Emmett. "He'll never be able to win the hearts of the civilians like you can." Emmett hoped he was wrong, but he was sure he wasn't. "He thinks he can run for mayor? Of my city?" Mayor Butter shouted. "Well, if he's going to try to be inspiring while running for mayor of Big Citya, I have him beat." Emmett rolled his eyes. Mayor Butter's hand shot to the ceiling. "I'm going to inspire them in a much more profound way. I'm going to run for president of Big Citya." Emmett wished that this, too, wasn't true. But Emmett wished for a lot of things, and alas, there he was. Alright, I better speed this up. So Nick goes to work at a worn-down, incredibly terrifying retail shop and spends the whole day there, even though he was only supposed to open, which would let him leave at 5. So now it's midnight and he's locking up and he's letting all the employees out. After he locks the door behind him, a mysterious figure comes up to him and gives him an invitation for a fundraiser. For him. Nick is surprised. He's running a campaign to become mayor, sure, but he never decided to have a fundraiser. So he took the invitation and noticed that the fundraiser was set up by an anonymous donor. He looks up and asks the mysterious figure about it, but he's gone. On his way to the car, he hears a girl yelling for her life. So he goes home and goes back to bed. Okay, yes, he saves her life, blah 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 blah. Eventually, he goes home and goes back to bed. The next morning, he gets up and goes to the coffee shop to see Kayla, who doesn't even know he exists. As per usual. After he buys a coffee, he drools over Kayla for a little bit and then heads home to see Austin. Austin is in his underwear. He gives Austin one of the invitations and asks him to please put some clothes on. Austin mutters for a few minutes about how he's actually Batman, and not Austin, and how he's going to save the world. Nick ignores him and heads to the living room to check on his computer, which is still on from the last time. He unmutes it and doesn't hear anything, so he sits at the desk and types a bit on it. "View startup, source code, and bug reports," he types. "Would you like to listen to music?" it asks. Nick turns the monitor off and starts to get ready for the fundraiser. While in the bathroom, he looks at his pair of black pajamas and ski mask. He's been using them quietly. Sneaking out at night, he beat a few criminals up for robbing banks and stealing purses from old ladies. He quickly grabs them and puts them in a suitcase, just in case he needs them. He tells Austin to hurry up, and a few hours later, Austin does. He hears a knock at the front door soon after Austin gets his suit on, which by now is about 6 o'clock. He answers it. It's a limo driver. They got him a limo. He is officially impressed. Someone obviously wants to get his attention. He gets in the limo and arrives at the municipal cafeteria where there is lots of wine being served. They enter the elevator and start to travel to the 5th floor. "Mayor Butter's gonna be pissed," says Nick to Austin. "The cafeteria is like his baby." Austin looks around. "It's about as big as his baby would be," said Austin. We step out of the elevator and look around. Nick talks to a few important members of the city council for a while, and asks about food to one of the lads over behind the bar. He answers quietly, almost in a whisper, as if he doesn't want anybody to hear him. "There is no free lunch." A woman in the center of the room calls everyone's attention and directs their eyes towards the stage. "Everyone, may I introduce you to the proud host of our fundraiser, the marvelous Catherine Dixie," she says. A familiar song starts to play. "Catherine Dixie," says Nick. "Why does Catherine Dixie want to throw me a fundraiser?" "She's rich," says Austin, who scarfed down a muffin in about 15 seconds. "She can afford whatever she wants." "But she's a famous actress. What interest does she have in politics? Or me?" asks Nick. Suddenly, the lights shut off. No one can see a thing. Says an evil voice. "I am Anonate." Nick quietly pulls the pajamas out of his suitcase and runs towards the restroom to change. "I only have one question. Where is Nicholas Lee?" The room is quiet. No one responds. "Hello? Does anyone hear me?" he says. The room stays quiet. "We can't see," says a member of the city council. "I'm sure we'd tell you if we knew." Anonate turns the lights back on, only to view Nicholas Lee with his black pajamas and ski mask. "Anonate, we meet at last," says Nick. "Who are you?" says Anonate. "Your worst nightmare," says Nick as he throws himself to punch Anonate. Anonate blocks him and throws him across the building into the wall. "Where's Nick?" asks a member of the city council. They all look around for a few seconds. Austin looks at the fellow with the black mask, looks at the muffins beside him, and then looks toward the crowd. He realizes he needs to make a choice about what he's going to do, and he tries his best not to choose the muffins. Nick leaps once again towards Anonate, who catches his arm and tackles him to the ground. "Nick must have left us," says the city councilman. "That jerk!" Austin thinks a bit more and makes a remarkable discovery that's potentially game-changing. He's wearing 2 sets of underwear. Sticking his pointer finger out as far away as he can, he dashes to the restroom to change his attire. Nick tries to get up, but fails. And Ananate presses his shoe against his neck.
I'll ask you one more time,
says Ananate.
where is Nicholas Lee?
Okay, says Nick. I'll tell you. Never! Austin shouts and rushes in with his pointer finger still outward. Ananate paused and looked toward him, as with everyone else in the cafeteria. To Nick's surprise, Austin stands proudly, wearing only those 2 sets of boxers. One of them rests in its normal place, but the other one, the one that has obviously not been washed in a few days due to the apartment complex repairing the machines, rests firmly on his head, covering his face.
Who are you?
Asks Ananate. I'm Austin Bat. Nick sighs. I'm never bringing him with me anywhere again.
To be continued!
Alright, it's really late. Theme. A good deal is one that ends with a handshake, not a signature. Item. A get-well-soon card mistakenly delivered to a funeral. Place. A gas station, with no gas in stock. Plot shred. A college kid drops out of school and moves back in with his parents. Character. A teenage girl who can't seem to get over the fact that her favorite band is broke up. Genre. A Steve Carell family movie. Alright, that's it, Michael. And I'll see you on Monday.
Clever outro.